Hello and welcome to the second video on our series on labor search and unemployment. This is the first video of the sub-series on labor market definitions and some data, some trends that are very interesting and very important to understand the evolution of labor markets. So the first thing we need to do is to define certain variables that are going to let us divide the population into groups so that we can model unemployment relative to other actions that agents can have. So the first thing is going to be N. So the variable N is going to be working age population. That just represents the total number of agents that can work. And so what we're doing here is we're not taking into account all the population of the country or of the economy that we're studying. We need to focus only on those who can work. Those are going to be people who are old enough to work, but not too old that they might be able to retire. Then after this is going to be Q. Q is going to stand for the labor force. And sometimes the labor force is called the economically active population. Economically active because they actively search for a job or are already working. And so by definition, Q has to be less than N. Q has to be less than N because you're going to have a subset of the working age population that's actually engaged on work or on search. Now, it is less also because some agents do not want to work or cannot work. And so examples of these are stay-at-home parents who might want to just stay at home, take care of their families, and this is a vital service they provide, and so they preferring to do that do not work. Students often do not work or they do not search for a job if they can just devote themselves to their studies. You also have early retirees or disabled people that whom for whatever reason cannot work and are no longer searching for a job. And then the final group is going to be the unemployed. And so unemployment, U, is going to be the number of agents that search for a job but do not have one. And so that's going to mean that U is going to be a subset of Q, a subset of the labor force. And that's going to leave Q minus U as the total number of employed agents. Now, what are we going to do with this? Well, actually, we cannot do anything directly because these levels, the total number of people, they aren't enough for us to understand what's happening in the economy. And a good example of this can be found if we compare Ontario and Newfoundland. So in Ontario, in February 2020, just before all the pandemic started, there were 436,000 unemployed people. And Newfoundland only had 30,000 people, a bit over 30,000. Yet the situation in both provinces is very, very different. While in Ontario there is an unemployment rate of there was an unemployment rate of just over 5%, Newfoundland has a very high unemployment rate of over 12%. Now this difference is clear in that even though Newfoundland has fewer unemployed people, they also have fewer people overall. And so what we need to do is to define ratios. And what we're going to do in the model is we're going to first define how those ratios move and then go to levels, comparing those ratios to the total size of the economy to get a sense of the total size of the unemployed, of the working age population, etc. Now, this is very similar to when you were taking your course last semester. You were talking about growth. And so instead of focusing on the GDP level, you will talk about GDP per capita. Okay? So this is the same sense as some countries can produce more just because they are larger, not because they are more productive. Same way that Ontario might have more unemployed people just because they are larger and not because unemployment is more of a problem. So to be clear, the ratios we're going to be using is going to be the unemployment rate. This answers the question, how big is unemployment? Unemployment is going to be then measured relative to the potential number of unemployed. So U over Q. How many people could have been unemployed? Okay? So you don't compare it to the total number of people there are, but to the number of people who were either searching for a job or had a job. Then the participation rate is going to measure how large is the labor force, how many people are either working or searching for a job relative to how many people could have been working or searching for a job. And then finally, we're going to ask if unemployment is enough. The employment rate, it's going to measure the total number of employed people, Q minus U, relative to the labor force. And this is because the employed have to produce for the whole population and not just for the economically active population. And so with this, we've covered all the basic definitions that we need to divide the population into these different groups. The economically active population, Q, the unemployed and the employed as dividing that economically active population in two.